Her stepmother humiliated her by cutting her hair, and later the same hand trembled as it begged her for forgiveness. They said a woman's hair carries her dignity, her youth, her identity. But when Lady Katarina returned from the river with her hair brutally cut off by the very woman who raised her, the entire village felt something shift. It wasn't just a humiliation, it was a declaration of war, one delivered in silence. For years, the stepmother held her power not with swords or screams, but with calculated smiles, whispered orders, and the kind of control that keeps people obedient, even when they know it's slowly killing them. But no one saw what was coming. One day, the same hand that cut Katarina's hair would tremble before her and beg for mercy. Before we uncover this forgotten chapter of medieval history, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the stories that were buried, but not erased. Katarina was 12 when her real mother died. The villagers still recall how she walked behind the funeral cart without shedding a single tear. Not because she felt nothing, but because the moment grief tried to speak, her stepmother's hand rested on her shoulder and squeezed just a little too hard. From then on, silence became Katarina's language. The stepmother, Lady Helene, arrived only 3 months after the burial. She did not come as a comfort to the broken family. She came as a replacement. Silk dresses, heavy perfumes, and cold eyes. That was her introduction to the manor. She spoke politely to the servants, but watched them like collectibles. And the moment Lord Stephen, Katarina's father, fell ill with a lung fever, she began to act more like the owner of the manor than its guardian. Katarina studied her carefully. Helene's footsteps were always light, yet the consequences of her orders were loud. Workers dismissed, expenses cut. Even Katarina's childhood room was stripped of color, replaced with bare stone and a wooden bed. Helene said it would make her stronger, but strength was never the goal. Control was. Years passed, and Katarina grew into a quiet young woman with sharp eyes and obedient manners. She ate little, spoke less, and obeyed every command. But Helene never trusted silence. Silence cannot be controlled. And in a house like this, control was the only currency. The incident by the river began with a simple statement from Helene. "Your hair is too long. You look wild." When Katarina didn't respond, Helene smiled her soft, practiced smile. "Come, fresh water will clear your mind." The walk was quiet, but the knife was already in her sleeve. Out there, far from the manor walls, Helene grabbed her by the braid and cut it off with one swift stroke. Katarina stood frozen, watching her hair fall onto wet stones like a fallen banner. The stepmother's voice was calm. "Now you look disciplined." She didn't know that humiliation has its own memory, a colder one than grief. That night, Katarina did not cry. She sat by the window, touching the uneven ends of her hair, and whispered to herself words no one else would hear. This will not be forgotten. Days turned into weeks, and the change in her was subtle but undeniable. She began waking before sunrise. She ate with the servants instead of in the main hall. She spent hours with villagers, helping elderly farmers, stitching clothes for children, even tending to sick animals. But behind every kindness was a study, a quiet observation of how people lived, how they trusted, how they suffered. The villagers began to speak of her differently, not as the quiet girl with the cruel stepmother, but as someone calm, patient, someone who listened, something Helene had never bothered to do. But Helene had influence. She still held the manor, controlled the money, and guarded her reputation like a shield. She saw Katarina's growing presence with unease. Power is hardest to maintain when it is threatened without words, and Katarina used none. One evening, a messenger arrived. Lord Stefan, Katarina's father, had taken a sudden turn for the worse. Helene immediately ordered preparations for his passing, even before the physician arrived. Katarina watched her calmly light candles, give instructions, and choose the black dress she would wear for the inevitable morning. Something twisted inside Katarina. She saw that Helene was not preparing for death. She was preparing for ownership. But something unexpected happened. Lord Stefan survived the night, and in those fragile hours, something shifted. He saw what he had ignored for years: the coldness of his wife, the exhaustion of his daughter. In a weak voice, he asked Helene to leave the room so he could speak to Katarina alone. She held his shaking hand. With great effort, he whispered, "When I am gone, do not let her take everything." They both knew he wasn't talking about land or money. He was talking about dignity. But before dawn, Lord Stefan passed away. Helene cried loudly, too loudly. Katarina remained silent, too silent, and people began to notice the difference.
At the funeral, the villagers looked to Katarina for guidance, not Helene. She carried herself with quiet dignity that required no performance. And grief, real grief, needs no applause. Helene saw this, and for the first time, felt something unfamiliar: fear.
That night, she confronted Katarina in the corridor. Her voice was sharp. "Do not forget your place. Everything here belongs to me now." Katarina looked at her and answered with the first defiance she had ever spoken aloud. "Not everything." Helene froze. Something in her eyes finally cracked, because she realized the silent child she once controlled now had something she could never reclaim. Not wealth, not loyalty, but the people.
And people can become power.
But what Katarina would soon uncover was that her stepmother still had one more secret, one that could destroy everything she had silently built. 3 days after Lord Stefan's funeral, silence settled over the manor like fog over a battlefield. Soft, yet suffocating. Helene took full control of everything: the ledgers, workers, supplies, storage, even the church donations. She handled it all with a smile, but her eyes watched every corner suspiciously, as if something unseen had begun to move against her. And indeed, it had. Katarina didn't challenge her directly. She never raised her voice, never made accusations. Instead, she visited each worker personally, listening to their struggles, sharing small solutions, giving her time when Helene gave only orders. The servants began to treat her respectfully, even protectively. Farmers who once avoided the manor now stopped Katarina in the village to ask for advice. Fishermen brought extra catch just for her. Wordless loyalty began to grow, one that did not belong to Helene. This frightened Helene more than any open rebellion. In one meeting with the church treasurer, she complained with a forced chuckle, "The girl has turned into a priest, teacher, and doctor all at once." Perhaps grief has made her dramatic, but grief had not made Katarina dramatic. It had made her certain. Her father's final words stayed with her like a vow. Do not let her take everything. Late one night, while inspecting the cellar records, Katarina found something strange. An entire shipment of grain marked, "Sent to the northern villages." but no one in the north had ever received it. She checked the ink, different handwriting. The accounting didn't match. She carefully traced it all back and realized the truth. Helene had been selling supplies on the side for months, even during her father's illness, even during harsh winters. While villages struggled, Helene profited. But exposing her would require proof, undeniable proof. And so, Katarina did something unexpected. She invited 3 respected villagers to dinner at the manor. When Helene heard, she was furious. "You invited them without asking me," Katarina simply answered. "They helped father when you did not." Helene smiled, but her anger showed in the way she held the wine glass, too tight, as if trying not to break it. She attended the dinner wearing her finest gown, her most polished manner. But Katarina's composure unsettled her. There was no visible rebellion, no challenge, just quiet patience. And quiet can be dangerous. During the dinner, Katarina asked calmly, "Mother, will you show them the grain ledger? They say the north needs more supplies. Perhaps we could help them again?" The room fell silent. Helene did not move. She knew what Katarina was really saying. The villagers sensed it too. Helene eventually rose, opened the ledger, and began flipping pages with trembling hands. Katarina watched. The villagers watched. Page after page, the numbers failed to add up. And in that moment, Helene understood. Katarina had seen everything. But before anything could be said aloud, something unexpected happened. A messenger arrived, dust-covered, exhausted, and shaking. He stumbled into the hall and spoke with urgency. "From the northern villages, they say your stepmother promised them grain for coin and signatures. They paid, but nothing arrived. They demand to speak to the rightful heir of this manor, Lady Katarina." Not Helene, Katarina. That single word changed everything. The villagers turned to Katarina, not with suspicion, but with trust. A trust that Helene had never earned, despite all her wealth and control. And in Helene's eyes, there was visible panic. For the first time, she realized her power was temporary, her reputation already shaking. That night, Helene attempted to defend herself. She said it was misunderstandings, clerical confusion, even claimed that Katarina was manipulating sympathy for attention. But people had grown tired of excuses. They had lived hunger. They had seen greed. And now, they had proof. Helene felt her control slipping. She withdrew to her chambers, locked the door, and for days refused to speak to anyone. Meanwhile, Katarina assumed responsibility, organizing supplies for the northern villages, seeking fair trade, ensuring food reached every home before winter's end. She remembered every face, every name, and slowly, the manor no longer felt like Helene's house. It felt like hers. On the 4th night, a servant knocked on Katarina's door in a rush. "She's calling for you. Lady Helene is unwell." Katarina entered the chamber. Helene sat by the window, pale, terrified, her hair loosely tied like she no longer cared for elegance. The first words she spoke were not commands, not threats, but something no one expected. "Katarina, please, teach me how you gained their loyalty. I have money, but no one stands with me anymore." The same hand that cut her hair now trembled. The same voice that silenced her now begged. Katarina stood before her calm, steady. She understood something in that moment. Helene had never feared loneliness, because she had never imagined it was possible for her. Now she faced it alone, and fear had reshaped her completely. Katarina did not hate her, not anymore. Hatred would have meant Helene still had power over her. Instead, she answered with quiet clarity.
You thought power was control, but power is care, and care cannot be bought.
Helene looked at her, eyes welling with tears.
Then tell me, what happens to me now?
Katarina stepped toward the door, paused,
Then said,
Nothing. For the first time in your life, nothing belongs to you. And she left her there, untouched, unharmed, but powerless. Because the cruelest punishment is to watch someone live the dignity you once stole from them. Power gained through fear is temporary. Power earned through compassion lasts beyond a lifetime. If this story moved you, subscribe to our channel for more untold histories, buried beneath silence, but never erased.